Welcome back, guys, and let's get started. So today we're going to talk about the PCB view and how to design the PCB correctly. But before we get into that, let's go back to the schematic view, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of the changes I made since yesterday. So yesterday I had a 12-volt power supply here and a ground here. So I replaced those with a barrel jack with a positive and negative lead. And I did the same thing over here for the LED. So what this does for us is if we go to the PCB view, there are now connections here ready to be connected to, which when we print this out, we will have locations to connect the power supply directly into. And we'll have locations to connect the LED strip directly into. So this makes it very easy for us when it comes down to when we are soldering and when we're ready to go with the actual applications of this. So coming back to the schematics, the last change that I made was I replaced the relay with a different relay because this relay has a PCB view that is more compatible with the relays that I actually own. So before we get started with the actual PCB design, two things that you need to do are make sure that when you right click, the sticky is selected. So if sticky is not selected, the problem is that when you move your PCB around a little bit to get a better perspective, the parts don't stick to your PCB. And I think that's kind of inconvenient, so I like to have sticky selected all the time so that when I try to get a better view of something to move it around, the PCB is still stuck to the rest of the parts. The next thing that you need to do is, while still selecting the PCB, come to the inspector and go to the bottom right here and make sure that you have a single-sided PCB. Single-sided PCBs usually cost less, and due to that I like to use those instead of the double-sided ones. Okay, so as we covered yesterday, the any changes that you make to the schematic or breadboard view, the PCB will have those changes in them, but these parts will be placed randomly. So you can't just right away click auto route and expect everything to work. There'll be errors and parts won't get connected because of the way that they're placed. So due to this, I like to rearrange my parts in a more convenient fashion before I go ahead and click the auto route feature. So I'm going to move this diode down here, because as you can see, these are going to be connecting right away anyway, so I don't have to go through and so keeping these parallel will allow the connections to occur more simply when we do the auto routing feature. So as you can see, this right here is connected to the transistor down here, so let's just bring that closer to that connection. And space these out evenly. Let's actually make the PCB a little bit bigger. It allows the actual auto routing to occur more simply. Okay, so now I'm going to move this a little bit over to the edge because it doesn't really need to be all that much in the way. And I'm going to move this guy over here because this part is connected, this pin is connected to this pin. Also, this resistor could easily be moved here and it would avoid double connections. Instead, you could just connect one to the other and move this over a little bit and this over a little bit. Okay. I think that this is ready to go. I think we can click auto route and it should give us the best possible path with no issues. So let's go ahead and do that. This will take a little bit of time because it's a single-sided PCB, so the actual auto routing requires a lot more calculation than a double-sided would, because there could be a lot more overlapping paths. So due to that, okay, as you can see, PCB, the auto routing seems to have failed, so let's just hit Control Z real quick and see where the error occurred. So the problem was that this pin wasn't able to connect to this pin. I think that's occurring because it's trying to use this path down here instead of going over and around. So let's go ahead and move this up a little bit. That way I feel it might go around instead of under when creating this. Alright, let's hit auto route and let's see what happens. Okay, it seems to have failed on that same exact point again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here and I'll come back to you guys once I figured out what the issue is. Okay, it seems to have worked. A couple things that you'll notice are that there's a couple of issues with the way that Fritzing does this. There's a couple bugs that cause there to be double wires where there's double connections where there shouldn't be. So once it does auto route, you have to just go in and delete some of these wires. We can get rid of those bend points by just double clicking on the actual bend point. I don't see the necessity for the bend point there. If you look here, there's an extra wire, so let's go ahead and get a connection. So let's go ahead and get rid of that connection. Let's go ahead and get rid of those bend points. Actually, I think one bend point is needed in that. I like to have a 90-degree feel to my my PCBs, so wherever I can, I try to keep that 90-degree. So if we go ahead and look here, this wire, this entire wire is completely unnecessary because this exact wire is connecting that same path. So we can go ahead and get rid of that and this will work perfectly fine, because if you look, this goes down and it's connecting to this point, which is connected to this point, which means we don't need another connection that's going from this point to there. So I don't see the need for that, and we can go ahead and get rid of that one. So let's go ahead and get rid of some of these bend points which have been added for no reason. Let's drag this guy out here. Get rid of that bend point, get rid of that bend point. And keep that there. I think we can actually move this in a little bit and save some room on our PCB. And let's bring that down. Let's bring this down. Everything else looks fine. Let's get rid of those bend points. Oh, Control Z. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, oh, there's another double wire. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. And get rid of that bend point. Go ahead and get rid of that bend point. Okay, so it seems that all other connections have been made correctly. Just create a little bit more room there. And everything looks good. So now all we need to do is resize our PCB and add a couple of holes for screws so that we can mount this PCB onto some surface that we need to. So to do that, you go to our core parts, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll see a section labeled, a part labeled holes. So pick that hole up and let's drop it in the corners. For our purposes, that should work perfectly fine. This is a 2.2 millimeter screw, so screw hole. So if you have 2.2 millimeter diameter screws, then this should work perfectly fine. If you want to change that up to a different diameter hole, you have the option to do that. So let's just do Control C, and actually we can do Command D or Control D if you have a Windows laptop or PC. I'm using a Mac, so I'm going to do Command D. Command D, and it just duplicates the part. that we've selected one more time. Let's go all the way to the bottom. So now we're ready to go. And that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned for more.